I never imagined I would be the only one by my mother-in-law's side during her final days, while brain cancer slowly took away her strength and memory. Her 4 children, including my husband and his siblings, seemed to disappear, as if she was a stranger to them. But I stayed. I chose to be her caregiver, to be the one she could count on when she needed love the most. And then, after she passed, she left everything, her entire estate, to me. Not a single thing was left for her own children. That decision shattered my marriage, tore my family apart, and turned me into the enemy in the eyes of the person I once loved most. If you've ever faced the crushing weight of love, betrayal, and loneliness, this story will take you on a journey you won't forget. Before we begin, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. Enjoy the video. From the very beginning, my mother-in-law, Sharon, was not just a distant figure or a name I heard from my husband. She was a force, a remarkable woman who bore the weight of tragedy and responsibility with a strength that was as inspiring as it was heartbreaking. After my father-in-law died suddenly in a car accident when the twins were just babies, Sharon became both mother and father to her 4 children, Jacob, the oldest at 38, Nate, my husband, 34, and the twins, Zoe and Becky, 27. She didn't just raise them alone. She also took over her late husband's company, stepping into a role she had never been prepared for. I admired her deeply. To me, she was the embodiment of resilience, the kind of woman many talked about but few truly understood. She never complained about the impossible juggling act between motherhood and business, even when the weight of it was crushing her. But beneath her unbreakable exterior, I sensed a certain loneliness, a longing for support, for love, for family unity. That unity, however, was something Sharon's children struggled to maintain. It was clear early on that they each carried their own heavy burdens and resentments. Jacob, the oldest, always seemed distant, like he was protecting himself from disappointment. Nate, the one I married, was caught between his obligations as a son and the relentless demands of his career. The twins, Zoe and Becky, often appeared to be caught in a world of their own, more interested in their social lives than their aging mother. As a result, Sharon ended up standing alone in quiet moments, her children scattering like leaves in the wind when things got hard. It was not something I realized fully until much later, but even then, the sharp sting of betrayal was just beginning. At first, my relationship with Sharon was simple, a bridge connecting 2 families. But as I became more involved, especially when her illness took hold, I saw the cracks widen. I watched as Sharon's children showed up sporadically, their visits brief and chilled by invisible walls of obligation rather than warmth. The twins would glance at their phones constantly. Jacob sighed like a weary man burdened beyond words, and Nate was torn, trying to balance everything but ultimately failing to be there when it mattered most. For me, the lines were clear. Sharon was family, and she deserved love, care, and loyalty. I often found myself playing the role of peacekeeper, listening to Sharon's quiet complaints about her children's absence and my husband's distracted promises to do better. Deep inside, I felt torn, caught between my commitment to Sharon and the growing distance in my own marriage. This was our family, a collection of complicated hearts and broken promises. Every interaction carried the silent tension of what was left unsaid. Every smile often masked deeper disappointment. And in the middle of it all stood me, trying to hold the pieces together even as they threatened to slip through my fingers. The fractures in this family, invisible to most, would soon be exposed in the most painful way imaginable. But before that storm hit, I had to make the hardest choice of my life, to stay and care for Sharon as her illness advanced, even if that meant risking the fragile thread holding my marriage together. As I tell you this, think about what it means to be caught between love and responsibility, between loyalty and sacrifice. This is the story of what happens when those lines blur, and how far one person will go to do what's right, even when the world turns against them. When the diagnosis came, it was brain cancer, advanced, aggressive, and unforgiving. I felt something break inside me that I didn't know could shatter. I was the first to know, the first to be entrusted with the truth, and somehow the only one who truly understood the gravity of it. Sharon, who had been so fiercely independent and strong, was suddenly fragile, vulnerable, and in need of care that no one else was willing to give. I remember the night I told Nate. It was supposed to be a moment we faced as partners, but instead, it became the start of a battle I didn't expect to fight. He was frustrated more with the disruption to his life, his work, and us than with the illness itself. For him, moving 2 states away to care for his mother seemed like an impossible sacrifice. Our arguments stretched for weeks, sharp words, silences that cut deeper than any shout. I insisted that I would stay with Sharon no matter what. I begged him to come with me, to help, but he chose his work instead. He told me his siblings could be there. But he lied. They were distant in ways that pushed Sharon deeper into loneliness. It was in those moments that I first felt the unbearable weight of betrayal, not the kind born from hatred but from absence, neglect, and broken promises. While I packed my bags, bracing for the new reality, I wrestled with my love for my husband and my loyalty to my mother-in-law. Did caring for Sharon mean losing Nate? Was my compassion the wedge slowly driving us apart? Living with Sharon changed everything. In those quiet rooms, watching her struggle to remember, to smile, to find strength, I felt both honored and heartbroken. The others dropped in infrequently, hurried visits filled with polite words but empty eyes. Zoe and Becky barely looked up from their phones. Jacob's visits felt like burdens he wanted to shed quickly. Nate visited too, but it was sporadic, a few days here and there that underscored the distance growing between us. I was alone in the thick of it. The sleepless nights, the endless worry, the exhaustion that seeped into my bones. But even in my fatigue, I fought to hold on to the person I loved, Sharon, my mother-in-law who had become my family in every way that truly mattered. The stark contrast between my devotion and her children's indifference gnawed at me, stirring a tempest of emotions, anger, sorrow, and a profound sense of injustice. Our marriage, already fraying at the edges, started to unravel. Nate's resentment simmered beneath his polite words. Our arguments about care, responsibility, and priorities became daily battles. Each fight left invisible scars, making me question if love was enough when respect, understanding, and sacrifice seemed to be in short supply. I was caught between two worlds, one where I gave everything for a woman who needed me, the other where the man I loved threatened to leave if I didn't conform to his demands. In those moments, I felt truly alone. But through the pain and the conflict, something deep inside me began to awaken. I realized love was not just about holding on, but sometimes about knowing when to stand firm, when to be the strength for someone else, even if it meant standing against those closest to you. I began to understand that loyalty could be costly, but it was also what defined who I was. As I look back, those months marked the turning point, not just in Sharon's life, but in mine. The sacrifices I made, the battles I fought, and the betrayals I endured would all lead to a choice far greater than caregiving. Losing Sharon was like losing a part of myself. Those last days were grueling, watching the woman who had become not just a mother-in-law, but a second mother, slip away under the weight of that cruel disease. The house felt hollow without her presence, the silence louder than any noise could be. I stayed by her side through it all, holding her hand as she took her final breath, whispering promises that I would always honor her and remember everything she taught me. Then came the will reading, a moment I thought would bring clarity, but instead unleashed a storm I never expected. The lawyer gathered us all in the same room, a heavy atmosphere thick with tension. Cameras off, phones silenced, but the air was electric with unspoken resentments and barely contained emotions. When the will was read, it was clear. Everything, her house, her savings, the company's shares, her jewelry, was left entirely to me. Not a single thing was left for her own children. The room fell into stunned silence, followed by a wave of murmurs and then open hostility. I sat rigid, trying to brace myself for the onslaught that was coming. Jacob's face hardened first. I could see the hurt and anger battling behind his eyes. Zoe and Becky exchanged glances, their polite facade slipping. And then there was Nate, my husband. His shock was real, but beneath it, I sensed something far more dangerous: resentment. His voice cracked as he tried to sound reasonable, telling me I deserved it for the care I had given Sharon. But then, just as quickly, he shifted. He mentioned fairness, splitting the inheritance among the siblings, as if my years of sacrifice were invisible. That evening, the tension exploded. They gathered in Sharon's study, voices rising, filled with accusations and blame. I couldn't hear everything, but Nate's anger rang loud and clear. The words selfish, unfair, and betrayal cut through the walls like knives. I left the room, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and fury. Their outrage wasn't just about money, it was about loyalty and love, or lack thereof. They saw the will as a betrayal, not just of inheritance, but of family bonds. For me, though, it was a testament to everything I had done when no one else would. I had been there day and night, while they lived their lives elsewhere. Yet, in that moment, I felt isolated and exposed, like the enemy in a war I never intended to fight. The people I once called family suddenly seemed like strangers, bound by resentment rather than blood. But somewhere deep inside, amidst the heartbreak, I found a strange clarity. This was more than just a legal battle, it was a reckoning. A painful, but necessary breaking point. I knew that moving forward wouldn't be about pleasing everyone. It would be about protecting what was rightfully mine and honoring the woman who had trusted me most. This chapter in my life was agony wrapped in betrayal, but it also marked the beginning of a transformation. What came next would test not only my resolve but my very sense of self, as I fought to survive the storm that threatened to consume everything. The inheritance dispute was more than just about money. It tore through the fabric of my marriage like a storm that refused to pass. Nate and I, already struggling on uncertain ground, found ourselves caught in a vicious cycle of arguments, misunderstandings, and deep emotional wounds that neither of us knew how to heal. At the heart of our quarrels was something far more personal: the dreams we had once shared versus the realities that now felt impossible to reconcile. Nate wanted children, a family built together, but I was hesitant, afraid. Not afraid of motherhood itself, but afraid of being left alone, of sacrificing my career, my independence, and my mental health for a family absent of support. Nate worked long hours and traveled frequently, his job demanding and relentless. I worked from home in a corporate position that required focus and precision. He thought because I was at home, I could easily take on the role of full-time caregiver for a child. But that wasn't the truth. My work was still work, deadlines didn't care if I was home, and a baby needed attention. I wanted more than to be just a caregiver. I needed a partner, someone to share the load, to be committed not just in words but in actions. Each conversation spiraled into frustration. "I can't keep putting my career on hold," I told him one night, tears threatening to spill. "I need you to be there." He fired back, "I'm doing everything I can. You're just making excuses." The words stung, the implication that I was shirking responsibility, trying to avoid the reality of starting a family. But I wasn't. I wanted balance, respect, and understanding. I wanted a man who saw me as more than just a role, more than just a financial contributor. Yet every time I opened up, Nate shut down or countered with demands of his own. This battle wasn't just about babies or work. It was about feeling unseen, unheard, and unloved. It was the slow erosion of trust and connection, the quiet moments when I realized that love alone wouldn't fix us if neither of us was willing to change. Outside our fights lurked the added pressure of the inheritance drama. Nate and his siblings saw my refusal to share the estate as selfish, a betrayal that extended far beyond family money. Nate used it against me, blaming me for everything that went wrong. Our broken marriage, his resentment, the distance growing between us. I felt isolated, not just from him, but from the family I had married into. The constant accusations, the fights, the painful silences, they chipped away at the woman I once was, forcing me into a corner where I had to choose: fight for a broken marriage or fight for myself. Through the tears, the anger, and the heartbreak, a new clarity emerged. I realized that love is not about control or expectations. It's about mutual respect, sacrifice, and partnership. And if those elements were missing, no amount of love would be enough to hold us together. Deciding to keep the inheritance was not easy. It wasn't about the money for me. It was about respect, fairness, and honoring Sharon's final wishes. But as soon as I made it clear that I wouldn't be sharing her estate with Nate and his siblings, everything spiraled out of control. What should have been a peaceful acceptance became the epicenter of conflict, hostility, and heartbreak. The texts started pouring in, harsh words, threats, and accusations from Jacob, Zoe, and Becky. They called me selfish, manipulative, even worse. Nate, who once showed some understanding, turned cold and distant. He blamed me for every crack in our marriage, using the inheritance as ammunition in our battles. It felt like I'd become a target, not just in our family but in my own home. I tried to reason, to explain that caring for Sharon when no one else would was not an entitlement but a sacrifice. I reminded them of the nights I stayed by her bedside, the meals I prepared, the endless calls to doctors, the emotional toll. None of it mattered. Their pain was real, but so was my exhaustion. I couldn't give in just to appease anger and entitlement. The breaking point came when Nate threatened me, divorce if I didn't agree to split the inheritance. Those words cut deeper than any fight. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about control, power, and the erosion of a bond that once felt unbreakable. I realized then that I had to choose. Filing for divorce was one of the hardest decisions I ever made. Standing alone in the lawyer's office, signing papers that would end a chapter of my life, I felt a mix of relief, sorrow, and fear. Relief that I was standing up for myself. Sorrow for what we had lost. Fear for what the future held. The aftermath was brutal. Nate's siblings ramped up their attacks, flooding my phone with hateful messages. They even threatened to contest the will in court. But I was prepared. Sharon's lawyer stood by me, a steady rock in the storm, ready to defend what was rightfully mine. The tension reached beyond family drama. It spilled into my daily life. I fortified the house, installing security measures to protect myself from unwanted confrontations. Every knock on the door, every unexpected call, sent my heart racing. I felt the weight of isolation, but also a fierce determination to not be bullied or silenced. Amid the chaos, my own family and close friends became anchors. My father offered quiet wisdom. My best friends lent a shoulder and unwavering support. Their faith in me was a balm to my wounds, reminding me that I wasn't alone even when it felt like the whole world had turned against me. In the midst of pain, I found strength I didn't know I had. This chapter was not just about what I inherited. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my future. After the storm of loss, betrayal, and painful decisions, I found myself standing at a crossroads, a place where my past and future collided, where hope struggled to break through the shadows. Moving into Sharon's house felt like stepping into a new world, heavy with memories, but also filled with quiet promise. It was her home, a sanctuary that she had built with determination, and now it was mine to carry forward. But starting over wasn't simple. The house was a fortress of both comfort and solitude. Every corner whispered stories of Sharon's strength and resilience, reminding me of the woman who had chosen me to carry her legacy. And yet, I grappled with an ache deeper than the physical space, a loneliness born from fractured family ties and a marriage left in ruins. The process of adjusting was slow and sometimes overwhelming. Changing states, handling legal matters, and setting up a new life demanded every ounce of my energy. But I wasn't alone. My dad's quiet presence and reassuring words anchored me when doubt crept in. Friends who stood by me offered laughter, shoulders to cry on, and a reminder that love still existed beyond loss. One of the greatest challenges was learning to trust myself again. After months of fighting, defending, and surviving, I realized that my strength wasn't just in endurance, it was in embracing my truth. The inheritance wasn't just money or assets, It was a symbol of my courage to stand up for what I believed in, even when the world tried to tear me down. With this legacy came opportunity. I had long held a dream to start my own business, a vision waiting patiently beneath layers of responsibility and uncertainty. Now, empowered by Sharon's gift, I took my first steps toward that dream. Resigning from my job felt like shedding a heavy coat, breath filling my lungs with possibility even as fears loomed. Still, the future wasn't free of shadows. Nate and his siblings remained a distant storm, their words and actions a reminder of battles not yet fully over. But I learned to armor myself not just with security systems and legal teams, but with something far stronger, a heart willing to heal and a mind determined to thrive. As I look forward, I carry both pain and hope in equal measure. Pain for the broken relationships and the love that faded. Hope for new beginnings, for the family I choose, and for a life where respect and kindness are the foundation. This story is not just about loss or inheritance. It's about the power to rise, to redefine family, and to find peace in the aftermath. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If you've ever faced betrayal, loss, or the courage to start over, please share your thoughts and stories in the comments. Let's support each other as we move forward. The path ahead is uncertain, but it's mine to walk, and I'm ready. Stay tuned, because this isn't the end, it's just the beginning.